Hello, and welcome back. It's tempting to think of money laundering and terrorist financing as two sides of the same coin. And indeed, you'll almost always see them mentioned together in regulations and compliance discussions under the umbrella of AML/CFT. While the combating part of the acronym suggests a unified fight, and the methods used to move funds can look strikingly similar, the underlying nature of these two activities is profoundly different. Understanding these differences isn't just a matter of academic precision. It forms the very foundation of an effective risk-based approach to compliance, influencing how you design your monitoring systems, what you look for in customer behavior, and how you ultimately report suspicious activity. To a compliance professional, confusing the two can lead to blind spots, as the red flags for one may be completely absent in the other. Money laundering is fundamentally about the past, attempting to legitimize money that has already been earned from a crime. Terrorist financing, in stark contrast, is about the future, gathering funds to enable a crime that has yet to occur. This distinction in tense, from past to future, is the conceptual key that unlocks all the other practical differences we are about to explore, from the source of the funds to the motivations of the actors and the very structure of their financial transactions. It is a distinction between a crime that generates money and money that generates a crime. The most fundamental divergence between money laundering and terrorist financing lies in the origin and nature of the funds involved. For money laundering, the starting point is always, without exception, criminal activity. The money itself is inherently dirty from the outset. Imagine a large-scale drug trafficking organization that generates millions of dollars in small denomination, cash-based street sales. This cash is a direct liability, a physical link to their crimes that is difficult to spend and impossible to invest without raising immediate suspicion. The entire purpose of the subsequent money laundering scheme is to sever this link, to wash the filth of its origins away so the criminals can enjoy their profits. The source is the problem to be solved. Conversely, terrorist financing presents a more complex picture because the funds can originate from both legitimate and illegitimate sources. A terrorist cell might be funded by state sponsors, by criminal enterprises like kidnapping for ransom or smuggling, but could just as easily be funded through donations to a seemingly legitimate charity, profits from an ordinary-looking small business, or even personal fund from its members. In these latter cases, the money itself is not initially dirty. It only becomes so because of its intended use. This is a crucial distinction. For launderers, the focus is on obscuring where the money came from, whereas for terrorists, the focus is on obscuring where the money is going and for what purpose. Flowing directly from the source of funds is the core motivation driving each activity, which in turn dictates the ultimate objective of the financial scheme. Money laundering is a fundamentally profit-driven enterprise. The criminal has already taken the risk to commit the predicate offense, be it fraud, corruption, or trafficking, and now wants to reap the rewards in a way that appears safe and legitimate. The end goal is personal or organizational enrichment, buying luxury cars, investing in real estate, capitalizing legitimate businesses, or simply having a bank account that can be used without triggering alarms. The entire process is designed to make dirty money usable for the benefit of the criminal. Terrorist financing, however, is not driven by profit, but by ideology. The purpose of the funds is not to enrich the individuals involved, but to provide the material support necessary to carry out terrorist acts. The money is a means to a violent, political, or ideological end. These funds are used to pay for operational expenses, such as acquiring weapons and explosives, funding training camps, facilitating travel for operatives, spreading propaganda, and supporting the families of group members. Therefore, while a money launderer's success is measured by their ability to integrate funds into the economy for personal use, a terrorist financier's success is measured by their ability to successfully deliver resources to an operational cell to facilitate an attack. These differences in origin and motivation manifest in the very structure and pattern of the financial transactions, creating distinct trails for a diligent analyst to follow. Money laundering schemes, particularly those dealing with significant sums, often involve complex and convoluted transactions designed to obscure the audit trail. You will typically see a circular flow of money, moving through numerous accounts, shell corporations, and multiple jurisdictions in a process known as layering. The goal is to create as much distance and complexity as possible between the initial placement of cash and the final integration of the seemingly clean funds. The transactions are often designed to mimic the activity of a legitimate, high-volume business. Terrorist financing, on the other hand, frequently involves smaller sums of money, which ironically can make them harder to detect against the vast backdrop of normal financial activity. The financial trail is often more direct and linear. Funds are collected and then funneled with relative speed towards the point of operational use. Instead of a complex web, you might see a pattern of collection from various sources into a single account, followed by a series of smaller, structured withdrawals or wire transfers to operatives. This method, sometimes referred to as smuffing when deliberately structured to avoid reporting thresholds, exploits the fact that small, seemingly innocuous transactions are less likely to trigger automated alerts in a monitoring system compared to the large, complex movements typical of professional money laundering. A subtle but important way to conceptualize the difference is by examining the ultimate direction of the financial flow relative to the legitimate economy. Money laundering is fundamentally a process of integration. It is about taking outside money, funds generated in the criminal underworld, and injecting it into the legitimate financial system. The entire journey is a one-way street, with the destination being a state of seeming legitimacy, where the funds are indistinguishable from any other lawfully earned money in a bank account or asset. The criminal wants to become a participant in the normal economy. Terrorist financing often works in the opposite direction. It can begin by collecting funds from within the legitimate economy, such as from salaries, business profits, or charitable donations, and then directing them out towards an illicit, non-economic purpose. The goal is not to participate in the economy, but to exploit its infrastructure to move resources efficiently to where they are needed for an attack. While terrorist groups that fund themselves through crime will need to launder those proceeds first, the final terrorist financing stage is always about channeling an expenditure for an operation, not investment or enrichment. This makes the financial system not a destination, as it is for the launderer, but merely a conduit. Given these operational distinctions, it naturally follows that the red flags and detection challenges for each activity are different. For money laundering, compliance professionals are often trained to look for anomalies of scale and logic. Red flags include transactions of a size or frequency that are inconsistent with a customer's stated profession or business history. The use of complex corporate structures with no apparent commercial purpose. Large cash deposits followed by immediate wire transfers to foreign jurisdictions, and a general lack of concern for transaction costs or investment risks. The focus is on finding behavior that doesn't make good business sense. Detecting terrorist financing requires a more nuanced approach, as the smaller amounts involved often don't trigger traditional thresholds. Here, the context and pattern are more important than the individual transaction amount. Red flags might include a series of small, repetitive transactions that fall just under reporting limits, funds flowing from a charity or nonprofit to an individual in a high-risk region, account activity involving multiple, unrelated individuals sending small sums to a single central person who then quickly disperses the funds, or using personal accounts to operate what appears to be an informal, unregistered money services business. The challenge is connecting seemingly low-risk dots to reveal a high-risk picture. Despite all these critical differences, it is imperative to understand where money laundering and terrorist financing converge, as this intersection is where many of the most dangerous threats lie. Major terrorist organizations, much like organized crime groups, require massive operating budgets and often turn to large-scale criminal activities to generate the necessary revenue. They may engage in drug trafficking, human trafficking, extortion, fraud, and the smuggling of goods. When a terrorist group generates funds through such predicate offenses, they're faced with the exact same problem as any other criminal enterprise. They have a large amount of dirty money that needs to be laundered before it can be safely used. In these scenarios, money laundering becomes a prerequisite for terrorist financing. The group must first wash the criminal proceeds to obscure their illicit origin and then, in a second and distinct phase, channel those newly cleaned funds to support their terrorist objectives. This convergence is precisely why a country's anti-money laundering framework is its first and most important line of defense against terrorism. By disrupting the laundering of funds, authorities can effectively cut off the financial oxygen that these groups need to survive and operate, regardless of the ultimate purpose of the money. The recognition of this convergence, particularly in the aftermath of the September 11th attacks, fundamentally reshaped the global regulatory landscape. It led international bodies like the Financial Action Task Force, FATF, to formally expand their mission from solely combating money laundering to including the financing of terrorism and proliferation. This is why we now have the integrated AML/CFT standard. The international community realized that even though the motivations and origins of the funds differ, the methods, channels, and financial infrastructure exploited by both criminals and terrorists are often the same. They both abuse shell companies, misuse charities, exploit complicit financial institutions, and rely on cross-border transactions to achieve their goals. For you as a compliance professional, this means the practical tools and obligations you must implement, such as conducting thorough customer due diligence, monitoring transactions for suspicious patterns, and filing suspicious activity reports, are designed to detect and deter both threats simultaneously. The legal framework intentionally combines the fight because the battlefield, the financial system itself, is the same. Your role is to defend that battlefield from all who would abuse it, whether their goal is enrichment or destruction. We'll continue building on these foundational concepts in our next session.